everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Wes Hodkiewicz. We're coming to you here from our Potawatomi Sportsbook studio. And Wes, just a few episodes ago, we were sitting in these chairs talking about a contract extension for a young Packers wide receiver as Jayden Reed signed a deal that will keep him under contract in Green Bay for a few more years. And now, it was actually during our last episode, while we were taping it, the news broke and the Packers made it official later that day that Christian Watson has now been signed to a multi-year contract extension to keep him in Green Bay for a while. Your thoughts on this? I mean, from my perspective, I think we were all hoping that this was going to happen, and I think the fact that it got taken care of in the spring, even before training camp rolls around, is great news for Green Bay.
Yeah, and I mean, what a partnership this has been between the Packers and Christian Watson, and certainly go back to last year. They did come to terms on that extension that gave Christian a little bit more security, got a little bit more money in his pocket, but also gave the Packers this offseason to potentially work out a more long-term deal, and that's what the Green Bay Packers did. For Christian Watson, everybody talks about the speed, right, the size, but for me, it's also the fact that he got to be there with Randall Cobb that one season in 2022.
His rookie year.
Yeah. And in so many ways, I felt like that was the continuation of that Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson, Cobb era in Green Bay. I think when you break it all down, the way that Watson fits in this locker room, in his place on this team, in addition to everything he does on the field, he exemplifies what it is to be a Green Bay Packer, and more specifically a Packers receiver. I just love the way he's embraced this thing, and for all the adversity he's had to work through, and certainly a big jump going from the FCS level at North Dakota State to playing for the Green Bay Packers and making that impact right away in year one and showing his skills. It's just been an upward climb, and even when he's had things that have knocked him back a little bit, like the ACL, he came back even stronger. I was talking to Bo Melton about it last week in the locker room before this extension. He said he came back faster than he was before the injury. And those are the type of things that you not only want to see, but you don't always expect. And, I mean, you and I have talked about it for years. I mean, this guy is an absolute freak of nature, and he's in the cards now for the Packers for the long run.
What you just mentioned that Melton said is what I was about to say, is that of all the things that I've been impressed with regarding Christian Watson, his athletic ability, the way he treats people off the field, the way he deals with the media, everything, he's a true pro in every sense. But I don't know, it's been a while, I guess I would say, since I saw a Packers player come back from an ACL injury, and almost immediately the feeling is he's better than he was before. Yeah. And we saw it, the Pittsburgh game was his first game back last year, about halfway through the year. And as the rest of last season unfolded, it was this is the best version of Christian Watson we've seen. Which makes me wonder, now that he's another year removed from the injury and from the rehab and everything, what are we going to see from Christian Watson in 2026? It's really enticing. A couple of angles as far as the larger picture here. One, at wide receiver, I mentioned Jayden Reed already, now Christian Watson. Matthew Golden is just in the second year of his rookie contract. The Packers essentially have that top three at wide receiver locked up for multiple years now. This is the group going forward, right? And you cross your fingers, you hope everybody stays healthy. Reed had the injuries last year. We know about Watson's history. But this is the group the Packers are moving forward with. And then from a contract extension perspective, looking wider at the roster, you checked off Reed, you checked off Watson. Now Tucker Kraft is probably next. Maybe Devontae Wyatt is in the mix. He's playing on the fifth-year option this year, coming off of that really nasty injury from Thanksgiving in Detroit. A lot going on here in Green Bay for one off season, but setting things up here for multiple years moving forward with Jordan Love as your franchise quarterback and leader.
Yeah, it's a great point you make too, Mike, because we watched so many guys depart in free agency, right? We wondered, okay, who are going to be the guys that in the 23 class, the guys that are left over from the 22 class, who are the Packers going to lock down and keep in their plans long term? And it didn't take Brian Gutekunst and that personnel department long to show, okay, Christian Watson is our guy. Jaden Reed is our guy. And if not for that ACL last year, Tucker Kraft probably already would have had an extension just based on the way he plays in the position that he's playing.
I agree.
This guy is on the precipice of becoming one of the top tight ends in the National Football League, let alone the Green Bay Packers roster. So I just think it's an exciting time right now for the Packers. And even listening, obviously at the time we're shooting this, we haven't talked to Jordan Love yet. He did offer some comments at his softball game last week. And I mean, there's going to be, when you reward a guy like Watson, who's not only a reliable receiver, but a guy that has stepped up. I mean, he is, whether he has the C on his chest or not, he is one of the captains of this football team. He's one of the leaders of this locker room, and the way that he conducts himself, you want to see those guys get rewarded. So I feel like for the Packers, they've had so many talented receivers come through here, but you and I have wondered this for years. Who is going to be the next one to get that extension? Devontae Adams, I should say. You know, when after he got traded, it was this renovation of the receiver room, and we've seen guys come and go. Alan Lazard, you know, in that conversation. Romeo Doubs signed. Dontavian Wicks, ends up getting traded to Philadelphia. And the Packers made it known that Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, and their first-round pick from a year ago, Matthew Golden, that is going to be the nucleus that they build this passing game around, and I have to imagine Jordan Love's pretty darn excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, he has to be, and I think the fact that there's going to be, at a position, as you just mentioned, where there's been turnover, and quite frankly, there is constant turnover at the position in the NFL, because there is no position that the college game cranks out more of than receivers who can play at this level. They're all over the place. You can restock your wide receiver room in the draft in any given year, but the Packers are now in a place where they're going to have some stability at that position, and maybe not so much a revolving door. And we'll see what that means for Jordan Love in the offense. I don't know if you saw what the question that I answered in Monday's Insider Inbox column. A reader was asking, where does this Packers trio of Watson, Reed, Golden, where does it stack up? And I didn't have time to look at everything across the league, but looking specifically at the NFC North, I think it's an interesting discussion because the Vikings have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and now Juwan Jennings, a free agent that they signed. The Detroit Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Isaac Tesla, all draft picks, all homegrown guys, just like the Packers trio, right? And then the Bears have Roma Dunze, Luther Burden III, and then they're kind of having an open competition for their wide receiver 3 spot. But again, those first two guys for the Bears, their own draft picks, the homegrown guys. I think it's an interest. I think there's a lot of close calls there in terms of which group in the NFC North is the best. What stands out to me the most when I sort of put all the names together is that there is a ton of really impressive young receiver talent in the NFC North, and Justin Jefferson is kind of the old head now, right? I mean, he's the best. He's the best of the bunch with what he's accomplished, but he's also the kind of the grizzly veteran in this division at wide receiver.
Yeah, and as I was kind of reacting a little bit to that and about the speed element in the inbox that I wrote for Tuesday, it kind of made me think a little bit about how, yes, it's very impressive right now what's going on in the North, but in some ways it's not anything too out of the ordinary, right? I mean, the Packers had to deal for years with Megatron in Detroit, right? And then obviously Stephon Diggs and the talent and the receivers. Obviously, you want to go even farther back, Randy Moss, Chris Carter, right? The Bears have been a little bit more come and go, but this is just something that, despite being the black and blue division, they've had elite receivers for a long time. When you compare these receiving cores, though, and if you want to do by extension the quarterback situation, I think it really, in what I feel are the most complete, are Detroit and Green Bay. And that probably goes back to being heavily drafted and developed. Minnesota is following that path, but there's some questions there with Addison and some off-the-field things that have kind of stymied his momentum a little bit, and the fact that they ran into the quarterback issues they had last season and Justin Jefferson, how that affected him. Detroit has a little bit more known commodities. When you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown now as an all-pro, Pro Bowl player, every single year you know what you're getting with him. I was extremely impressed with Tesla last year. He made some big-time catches, including against the Packers in a couple games. I think he's a guy that really complements that room really well. They felt confident enough about him as that third option. Khalif Raymond, I think, departed this year in free agency. They're going to build around that nucleus now with Jared Goff. But for the Packers, when you finally boil down and kind of distill all these receivers, all these options, what they've had, sort of developed and uncovered during the Jordan Love era, now you have a very defined number 3, top 3 receivers. And then also Savion Williams, who can handle the ball in the backfield. Bo Melton back in the receiving room this season gives you an option as that guy who can spell both Golden and Christian Watson to keep the downfield plays in the playbook. I like the upside of Green Bay's room right now. And with the runway clear, we've talked about it all offseason, just how far can Matthew Golden take this thing? When people ask us all the time, what are your first impressions? What are your early thoughts on training camp or on OTAs and who's impressed you? Well, we only see one practice a week. This week we'll see a little bit more with minicamp.
Yeah.
But Matthew Golden is catching passes. The Packers are drawing things up for Matthew Golden. And that is what excites me because he can take a top off the defense. He can run a crossing route and burn a cornerback. There's so many different ways that he can affect the football game. And now he has the reps to do it.
Yeah, and I had a story last week on Packers.com. Folks can go check it out if they want to. It was after it was posted, I believe, on Wednesday morning after we had the open practice on Tuesday. And Golden talked about how, it's not to say he bulked up in some huge way, but he put some weight on.
Mm-hmm.
He felt that his size and not, kind of having a little bit of extra bulk on his body contributed to some of the injury issues that he had last year that slowed him down, that he wasn't playing at full strength or games that he had to miss, et cetera. And as you said, what we've seen on the practice field, we see the ball going his way on a fairly regular basis in 11 on 11. And I think, as I mentioned in an answer to an Insider Inbox question last week, even though he just got a contract extension a few weeks ago, Jaden Reed is kind of the guy everybody's sleeping on because he missed such a huge chunk of the season last year. He scores a touchdown in the season opener. He gets injured in week 2. He misses 3 months, and then he comes back, and he's scoring a touchdown in the playoff game, against the Bears down in Chicago. But everybody, forgets in some ways just how good Jaden Reed was his first 2 years when 800-plus yards back-to-back years in a pretty deep receiver room. He was the leading receiver on this team his first 2 seasons in the NFL. So it's an exciting group. It's what you envision, right, when you spend in consecutive years, or I guess I would say three out of 4 years, you spend a second-round pick, and a first-round pick at wide receiver. Yeah. And now here are those guys. 2 of them have now signed their second contracts. The first-round pick is on his rookie contract. You have that 5th-year option with him down the road, and you're moving forward with that bunch. This is exactly what you envision if players develop the way you hope they're going to develop, and that's what's happening in Green Bay.
And the thing that'll be cool too, Mike, is we're seeing a little bit in these practices that the guys who are going to step up to take those 5-6 spots on this roster too, right? When you look at the undrafted rookie they brought in, Stradivant, out of Florida, in his upside. Will Shepard's back from the practice squad. Isaiah Nayor is a guy I wrote about in Insider Inbox. I mean, structurally, he's built the same way as Christian Watson and runs in the same vicinity of him.
When he walked on the practice field, he was a late arrival last year. When he walked on the practice field last summer and you started seeing him running routes, with the threes and whatnot, it's sort of I can see why they brought this guy in as sort of like a flyer, right? Like where you're taking a chance to see what somebody's got. The physical tools that Isaiah Nayor has, they definitely catch the eye.
And then that goes to tight end then and running back in these various positions that the Packers have. I mean, it's so difficult. There was times in the middle of that run with Aaron Rodgers, he wins the second MVP, where it was so clear that who the top 3 were, but you didn't really know who 4 was. You didn't know who that next guy up was going to be. The Packers have intriguing options in that area too, and certainly the tight end position is completely different than it was a decade ago with a guy like Tucker Kraft leading the charge. So if they get healthy, if they can keep guys on the field, it's just those 3 building, looking specifically at receiver, those 3 being able to build together and grow together, being as young as they are, that sure is enticing for the future of this Packers passing game.
Absolutely. I want to ask you a couple questions regarding minicamp that we're about to head out to the practice field to start watching, but we do need to pay some bills, so let's first hear a quick word from our sponsor. SiriusXM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. Welcome back to Packers Unscripted. All right, Wes, this week is sort of not officially, but unofficially the end of the off-season program with the 3-day minicamp, Tuesday to Thursday. It'll be the last few days of media access here before everything kind of goes dark until the start of training camp. So we'll be heading out to the practice field shortly to catch practice number 1 of minicamp. Just anything that I guess rises to the top of your list as far as what you're watching for here in these last couple days of the offseason program?
I'm going to probably be keeping my eyes pretty close on the edge rushers. You were a part of that conversation last week with Micah Parsons and him addressing kind of where he's at in his rehab process. And again, a mature approach that he's taking to this thing. It's going to be, still 4 months. He's at the 5-month mark. He's got to get to 9 as far as the return to play aspect of it. So we know pretty well that the Packers are going to need to find pass rushers to get them through the month of September, to get that initial push of the season. And he talked about Lucas Van Ness and the step he expects him to make and the growth that he's shown. And I mean, when you look at the makeup and the prototype for an NFL pass rusher, Lucas Van Ness is that poster child. He has everything you want to see. And now he has a few years under his belt. I think still only 24 years old. I mean, he's now, much like Matthew Golden on the offensive side of the ball, I think there's nothing but air and opportunity out there for him and seeing how that's going to go. And we've talked about it at various points of this offseason too, but I mean, physically, Barron Sorrell is just so impressive with what he's done to build his body. I mean, this is an incredibly young man that came in last year just trying to find his way, tread some water, and then, had some success at the end of last season. Well, now he looks like a full-grown man. Mm-hmm. And adding him into the equation with Brenton Cox, and hopefully the Packers can get Colin Oliver back on the field here because you see the dimension he can add to this pass rush too. That's going to be the main task. It's on both Jonathan Gannon, it's on the personnel department, it's on the players themselves. You need to show that you can survive without Micah Parsons here, and the Packers have a lot of young men with the upside to do it.
Yeah, I was asked a question in Insider Inbox about, looking at players when they come back after the off season and, what do you notice physically? And I said, the first guys I always look at are the draft picks from the previous year, right? Because now this is their first full off season as NFL players. And the two guys physically that I noticed, looked a little bit different than what we saw last year were Matthew Golden and Barron Sorrell. You can tell that they've put in the time with their bodies. It's made a difference. They physically have taken another step. So then how does that translate to the field now in year 2? I think another thing we'll be looking for, and again, this comes with that caveat of during the 2 weeks of OTAs, the Packers had 3 or 4 practices a week, and we were only watching 1 practice, right? But in the 2 practices we saw Trey Smack have a pretty good day, and we saw him have a rough day out there when it got pretty windy at Nitschke Field last week. So now that we're going to have multiple practices in a row here to watch, we'll see what they do with the kicking periods and how Smack does there. I'm sure that's something that's going to be followed. And then for me, it's also just wanting to get kind of that last glance at the depth chart before, we take that break, the long break before training camp. Because we've talked on this show about the rookie draft picks that we've seen getting rotated in and getting reps with the ones. We've seen Brandon Cisse and Chris McClellan and Jagger Burton last week on the offensive line. Are they holding those spots now through minicamp? Are they still going to be rotating in with the ones? Is anybody else, getting into that rotation when the first units are out on the field? It's that, as I say, that last glance at where the depth chart is right now as the offseason program ends, and those are the mental notes that you make for when the guys come back for the start of training.
Yeah, it's an astute observation, and it is like this. I guess you'd almost call it like an elongated trial run, right? I mean, it's being able to show that, okay, we're going to get some reps because there's some other veterans here at these positions that aren't available right now for one reason or another. So what do you do with them? What is that first impression that you make off of those snaps? And I think Cisse is a really interesting one because by all accounts, you would think Benjamin St-Juste, the free agent they signed, he'll be a part of that conversation and that rotation, but he's not available right now. So when Keyshawn Nixon was coming off, it is Cisse going in there and having to show, okay, I can run with these guys. Same thing with McClellan. When you don't have Devontae Wyatt, that's the biggest piece of your defensive front, the interior defensive front for sure. You have to have guys that are going to step up and maximize those opportunities. So, yeah, that's going to be really an intriguing thing to be able to follow and see, okay, when we get to training camp, who are going to be those first guys out of the gate, who are going to be the guys that the Packers are going to look to, get going both on offense and defense and start to build their rotations around. Because, yeah, with the way this thing is structured and there's not enough time, everyone talks about it, you only have so many snaps.
Right.
To be able to head into training camp and sort of hit the ground running, I mean, that's imperative. And when you look at the guys historically who have claimed spots as rookies, that's what they did. It wasn't just the fact that, okay, at the end of camp they look good. It's at the beginning. They're pushing. They're finding opportunities, and then when they get in the preseason games and some of those bigger moments, showing that it's not too big for them.
Yeah, it's the old adage of force your way on the field, right? Make yourself kind of so the coaches can't ignore you. They've got to put you in there and give you those chances.
And that can happen in any round, right? Carrington Valentine did it as a 7th-round pick.
No doubt.
It can be anyone from anywhere in any round, depending on the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we got practice to get to.
We do.
So we're going to call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of minicamp all week long. We'll have all sorts of stories, videos, everything else for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.